this is Annette with Annette's Astrology Corner, and this is your energetic reading for dear Capricorns for June of 2016. And your ruler is going to be in Sagittarius, which is in retrograde. And you are doing a lot of internal work. What I think you're feeling is a very intentional, what I think you're feeling is a very intense growth cycle. And this is where you move away from past karma and you move toward new and exciting, and you adventure out into new mindsets and to new belief systems, and where you start to adapt in energy a little bit easier. Now, for the first through the end of the month, Saturn in Sagittarius is going to be squaring off with Jupiter, squaring off with Neptune, and squaring off with the North Node. What I think this significantly has to do with is Saturn wants to get control of situations that I feel have either spiraled out of control or they lack the discipline and structure that's necessary on a day-to-day level. I believe this has a lot to do with the way that you think, both on a very immediate level, but also on a very expansive level. What you're trying to do is really understand everything so that it elevates you toward the North Node. I think what's difficult about that is when we really dive deep into some of these situations, what it really does is it really opens us up to a lot of mental insecurity. I think initially, and I don't even think that you feel insecure, but what I think it does is it brings up vulnerabilities. I think vulnerabilities is a better word than insecurities. Look at my dog. He is so ridiculous. I'm so sorry you have to see him whatever makes him happy. So I think what we're trying to do is you're trying to move forward and you're trying to ascend and you're trying to look at this really elevated perspective. Some of it may be clashing with habitually how you think and habitually what's worked for you. So what's really hard about you guys is you're super enlightened, and if it works for you, that's the direction that you go, and you remain consistent, which is one of the best things about a Capricorn energy. And yes, that's great, but if you get stuck there and you don't ever veer off on a different path, I think that's where the problem is lying. And so I believe that this energy is really testing the way that you think and testing the way that you feel about everything so that it can get you to be adaptable in situations that I think before you were probably pretty rigid about, because consistently they had produced a result. So from the 1st until the 12th, Saturn is going to be opposing the Sun in Gemini, and from about the 10th, it's going to be opposing Venus. So this adaptable energy is kind of unsettling. Adaptability is great, but you don't like situations that are in opposition, meaning that that there are extremes to it. You don't like extremes. When you get in an extreme environment, you want to control it. You want to neutralize it. You want to make it consistent. You want to provide some stability to the situation. And this energy, there is some element that is extreme about it that you feel like you have no control over. And so it's very frustrating in the month of June. Now, what I guarantee you that this does inevitably is that it allows you to be, you're going to understand the validity of extremes. You're going to have some respect for it. You're going to have some appreciation for looking at things from two different perspectives. Because the two different perspectives are so extreme, what it does is it forces you to kind of intellectually pursue both of those extremes and try to make sense out of them so that you can inevitably get in control of them. But what you don't realize is that this is a realization process for you. This whole time that you're being pushed in these extremes and you're trying to control an external environment, what it's really doing is it's evolving you internally. It's making you much more adaptable. But it's a little hidden, manipulative tactic that the universe does when it's in Scorpio. So I don't even want to get into that. So from the 24th until the 29th, Saturn in Sagittarius is going to quincunx Venus in Cancer. So Cancer energy is your polar opposite. It's very gooey. It's very emotional. It's not consistent. It's ups and it's downs. And yes, you have the kind of the same goals, but Cancer energy goes about everything, that same goal in a different way. And it's frustrating for you. It's so deeply, they're so deeply emotional about everything, and they go to these extremes in their emotion when logic to you says, I could totally get to where you're at and apply logic the entire time. I don't need to go to that emotional extreme to get there. It's very frustrating when we look at others, and what it reveals in us is that either we don't have enough emotional intensity in that situation, and then it's a karmic journey that we go on with them, or that you realize that you were emotional in kind of a different way. So Capricorn energy, and I know I have, I think my second and my third house are in Capricorn. And it makes me incredibly rigid. If I'm confronted, or if I go after what I value, or my thoughts are very regimented, it's very hard for me to break free sometimes in my mindsets, because I'm very structured and detail oriented, and they're very goal oriented. So it can be very difficult when you have Capricorn energy influencing you to break out of the norm. But what I think you're going to understand is, through this opposition, through this extreme environment, there's probably some validity in what this person's feeling, and there's probably some validity in your wisdom. And between the two, I think you get to merge the situation a lot better. On the 4th, we have a new moon in Gemini. It's going to be conjunct with Venus in Gemini. So this is about those day-to-day routines, rituals, and mindsets. Now, I believe that this is a mental journey for you. So first of all, your ruler is involved in a mutable grand cross. And so I'm going to tell you right now, Saturn gets pissy and downright just absolutely annoyed by extremes. Like, Saturn doesn't deal in extremes. Saturn controls extremes. It doesn't like things going in those crazy directions but Saturn's in dualistic energy, and the energy is in dualistic energy. And so some of this is about controlling it, but being somewhat adaptable so that you're understood. Like, you have to have that intellectual capacity to be able to really absorb the duality so that you can get control of it. And I think that's the journey with this new moon, is that new beginning is, how do I be extremely rational in energy that's irrational? Or how do I identify the big picture when I'm dealing with this situation that's just blowing up in front of my face, or somebody who's being very unrealistic when it's logical to make these decisions? Like, how do I put in place like powerful routines and rituals on a day-to-day basis that are logical and rational in this situation when it feels to create this new beginning? Like, you want to add structure where there is no structure, and it's being pulled in 4 different areas, and you're trying to add structure in each one of those areas. And those areas for you are what you value, who you value, why you value it, your daily routines and rituals, your mindsets on a day-to-day level, keeping them very realistic, keeping them realistic, but also keeping them dualistic and adaptable. And then looking at the past and really trying to find the pearls in the past and applying them to the future, and being very adaptable. You can't cling to a mindset from the past. What you need to do is use the past as a teaching tool, and then start to envelop, and it starts to really unfold in the present. From the 1st to the 10th, we have a mutable grand cross. It will end, and your ruler will no longer be involved in that mutable grand cross. But it will then, from the 12th into the 16th, fall into what's called a mutable T-square, and then it forms into another mutable grand cross. So again, this has everything to do with about taking a look at the past and being adaptable and seeing how it applies to the present, and really elevating your mindsets. And what this really does is it helps you form some very distinct patterns in behavior, and you take a look at everything on this very elevated level, and then you solve the problem in your day-to-day environment. So there's something in your day-to-day environment that needs to be solved. And it needs to have a realistic and a direct approach, and then kind of even an indirect approach. So I think at this point, Neptune is in Pisces. It's going to go direct and it's going to go indirect. So you may have to have two different approaches to this situation to be able to communicate effectively, to be able to be understood correctly. Then on the 17th to the 24th, we have a mutable grand cross. Your ruler will be involved in that. This mutable grand cross, again, we'll be dealing with all of this. Look, it is very hard to consider all areas in your life, all areas of your mental status. So we're talking about the reflective cycle. We're talking about forward energy, forward thoughts. And we're talking about past thoughts. And then we're talking about a realistic approach. And then we're looking at our day-to-day routines and rituals. And then we're also taking a look at our life. And so what you're trying to do is really merge all of these. So what happens in immutable grand cross is we find out where all of these areas have some sort of, there's a consistent inconsistency in all of these areas. And you're going to problem solve that out. And then you're going to elevate this process. And then you're going to add consistency to those in all four of those areas that merge all of this and get it back going forward, all of it. But before you do that, there comes this time of whirling confusion where I think, it's a different concept. Then we have the full moon. This is the second full moon that's going to be in Sagittarius. Our first full moon was in May, and our cumulative full moon, that second full moon, is going to be in June. This has everything to do with the past. This is a very healing component. It's a very cumulative component. What this deeply has to do with is either a Cancer energy in your life or about your relationships, your partnerships, and your unions. And you're going to be very intuitively guided, I think, in this energy. This is going to be a gut feeling that I think is going to compel you in this energy. The energies, of course, is in that grand mutable cross that I'm talking about. So for you, this has to do with in your relationships. What are you unrealistic about? What kind of approach do you need? There's probably a dualistic approach. This has something to do with a past karmic cycle that you've been on with somebody. It could be a sibling. It could be it could be somebody at work. It could be somebody that you're going to school with. It could be somebody that is your neighbor. But it is a situation where you are trying to master, you are trying to get through to somebody that's significant enough for you to pour this energy into. There is a sense of confusion. There is a sense of there's a sense of being misunderstood. But what I think is very revealing about this energy is as you're having these difficult conversations, as you're trying to get them to wake up, or as you're trying to get them to understand you, what I think is that you start to understand areas in your life, the commitments mentally that you need to make, the type of communication, the way that you need to elevate, or the way that you need to adapt your communication to all styles. It's really going to adapt communication and being understood for you. Because here's the thing, there's an intensity about a Capricorn, and Capricorns come off wrong all the time because they're extremely logical and rational creatures, and they're very traditional, and we're in a time where tradition is not understood, and so you're going to have to start to adapt to this untraditional environment. You're going to have to adapt to the level of respect. Like you believe that maybe if you're in authority that you should just have this level of respect, but in this current life you have to earn respect, and that's by communicating effectively and being understood. So for some of you, this is definitely about that. It can be a weird journey because I think initially you start out the journey trying to help somebody else, but what you really don't realize is that you end up helping yourself evolve. Anyhow, guys, thank you so much for watching Annette's Astrology Corner, and I look forward to talking to you guys again on the next month.